start. What do you think is a greater danger to the future of cinema? The technology, YouTube, and all these things, or the culture of indifference that you were talking about, the neutrality?
Technology has no particular meaning. If we shoot on celluloid or if we shoot on something else, it doesn't matter very much if it's 3D or not. I hope it won't be 3D, but whatever it is always a storytelling. And storytelling will survive, but the danger is that the stories will be stupid. And this is the bad thing. Because then humanity may degrade and see our life in a very simplistic light. And this is the danger. Corrosion of mind and corrosion of our feelings, of our emotions. This may always go down or may go up as well. Yes, please.
You made a film, in English it's called Camouflage. I think it was the late 70s or the early 80s, I can't remember. They showed some of the films at the MoMA last year.
Yeah.
And as I was watching the film, it struck me how open-minded this film was. And could you tell me what the conditions were to make this film in Poland at that time?
Well, it was shot, if I remember correctly, 74. So it was already time of certain liberalization in Poland. And the script was very easily approved because people, first of all, it was a game. We were writing scripts in a certain way. I would never publish the script the way it was written. Because there was some homage to the censors to make them happy. Some lines which will never in the film, but that was making them, was placated and making them quiet. Then when they have seen the film, there was a major objection. A couple of things have been cut, and there was a major question, is this film going to be released or not? By some little good luck, the film got released, but one of the conditions was that there will be no publicity, so the posters were torn down. It was a marvelous publicity, you cannot have it better. And it was also an instruction that no positive review may be published. So there were practically no reviews. A couple of it that were very negative, but they were not very sincere. So this created an interest. And the film was my biggest commercial success. It has an enormous amount of spectators, what was great. Because every day people were whispering, probably they will withdraw this film from the distribution next day. So they were queuing in the morning, and the film was shown a lot. What was my great satisfaction? What they had to cut was not particularly painful, but the censors had to prove that they are vigilant. So they did prove it. Is there any other question?
Well, I've got one more. I don't want to.
Please go ahead.
Deal with person, but I've been a fan of your work for a long time. There's another film that you made, Family Matters.
Yeah.
And I just have a question at the beginning. It's about a kind of engineer that works in this very high-tech building. I guess it was Warsaw. And he gets a call related to his family. But the scene was so spectacular at the beginning with this entourage of Indians arriving to. Could you explain to me like what was going on, and is that something that you typically would see in Poland at that time?
Well, it was just the beginning of the 70s, and there was a moment when, after a long period of total stagnation, the new communist leader was a little bit more open-minded than his predecessor. The name of his name was Gierek, and he was brought up in France as a worker, so he was a little bit less narrow-minded than the previous leader, Mr. Gomułka. And there was some opening in the West. We were taking some loans from the West to develop technology. Most of these loans were wasted because technology was bought erroneously, not what we needed. Typical for communist economy. But there was some sort of, energy that has appeared at that time. In fact, historians will decide, did this period contribute to our liberalization? I think it did. Even if we have mostly wasted all these loans and we had to pay back with interest rates very high. But it opened some initiative. People became more entrepreneurial in the 70s. And it brought us to the solidarity movement and to the protest movement. So I think it was reflected in the film, but my main concern was the disappearance of the old world. And in fact, I was all wrong myself, because this world did not disappear totally as it does in the film. And whoever survived of the old landlords, of the old, let us say, class of all the big bourgeoisie, they are now getting their property back. Not that many are alive, but this is a process I did not expect. It was a miracle that happened. That 20 years later, some things have been reversed. However, it is not fairly done. Lots of property has been taken by communists and never given back. There is no legal regulation about the restoration of the goods, and especially many Jewish families that have no descendants because they were all killed. Nobody can get this property back, and it is unjust, no doubt about it. So it is not all fairly resolved. But it is an irony of history that 40 years later, after the so-called nationalization, things went back to the old owners. Yes, please.
Do you commonly work with the same crew from movie to movie, or do you assemble a different crew for each?
Well, it depends. I try to. That's my nature. I rather, I have only one wife in my life, so you can imagine this is very untypical for a filmmaker. And the same with my collaborators. I try to keep the same. I worked many years with the cameraman Sławomir Idziak, who made later quite impressive career in Hollywood. He shot pre-last Harry Potter. He shot Black Hawk's Down and many other prestigious films. And we have made like 11 or 12 films together. Now with this new young cameraman, I hope we will work in future if I manage to work in future, because I think he's very talented and we work in a very good harmony. But he could have been my grandson easily. Again, something that is quite moving to me. So in most cases, most actors, when they are in one of my films, they are in other films, then if I like them. So most of them you can recognize again.
The final thing I'd like to ask you is a kind of more practical life thing, because some of the comments you made actually in the back, and you were talking about your film, how so many of your films come from questions that you have about things. And you have a very interesting attitude to problems in life. You're talking about also the problems of censorship and how you actually welcome them sometimes because it made you think. So, I mean, a lot of us see problems as something to be avoided, to run away from, and it seems to be problems of life and reality seem to be like almost a fuel for you, for your creation.
Well, yes, I won't praise censorship. Our life, our censorship was not any better than it is now. It was far worse. But it is true that every challenge forces you to mobilize your forces. And filmmaking is always a challenge. It's not a natural thing. The natural thing is unemployment. And we are all bound to be unemployed. Nobody called us to be filmmakers. So if we manage to impose ourselves with our films, it is a miracle. And we should be very happy about it, because we have no particular right to express ourselves in films. Nobody gave us this right. There is no amendment to the Constitution that everybody has right to make his own film, even if he has a cell phone. Well, he may make it, but nobody would like to see it. So, and film exists only when there is a dialogue, when there is a communique and somebody receives it. Film is not shown, it's not existing. So, there is always a challenge. I haven't seen anybody working without this pressure. This pressure is enormous. But I like it. Yeah. Yes, please.
Yes, may I just ask, do you have any favorite American films?
Oh, definitely. Yes. I was very much impressed by Elia Kazan. He was one of my favorite directors many years. Well, I like very much work of Francis Ford Coppola, who is exactly my age. So I consider him a colleague, and we know each other, and I think we have been knowing each other for many years. Martin Scorsese is one of these directors who I like very much. There are many others who I can see I like them, but I appreciate them very much. It's a little bit of difference. Like Woody Allen, who is making the most depressive downers to me. Each film of his is the beginning of the Great Depression. But at the same time, he's very European filmmaker and very intelligent one. So, you know, the list is growing, and there are many others whom I have. Transmanic, I would quote as ever. Peter Weir, who is Australian, so he's not American, but he's Hollywood director, and he's one of the greatest. Also, his selection of scripts is fantastic. He has never made a film that would be irrelevant. So that's, Hollywood is not that easy yet. Doesn't have that often. So I already quoted quite a few names.
For you personally, do you find it easier now or during communist times to make films in terms of financing and censorship? I think you've talked a lot about between censors back then and censorship now, whether it be the feminists with this last film, or if you can talk a little bit more about that.
In this sense, you really cannot compare them. They were different. And you know, it is like comparing two contagious diseases, which is the worst one. Very hard to say. And you know, you cannot go back to the river which I left. I think for the country, there is no doubt, for people, that the non-repressive system, the democratic system, is far better. For an artist, sometimes this repressive system, in the moment of its agony, of its decomposition, was acting in our favor. We had a very good situation in a way, but it was only a temporary moment when the system was already falling apart, and some advantages were still available, and some disadvantages were weaker than ever. Censorship was weakening gradually. But no way to stop the course of history. And besides, I was younger, now I'm older, so it's also a very big difference. And of course, I don't want old times to be back, no doubt. No particular sentimental. Yes, please. Well, we have one voice there, and then...
Some more questions.
Yes, please.
How do you determine which story is good enough or worthy for you to tell?
Well, it's purely intuitive. It's usually when I like the story in the evening and I fall asleep. If I wake up in the morning and I still want to tell the story, it is a good sign, and maybe I really like it. But sometimes it's changing. I like certain stories, and then I thought, well, I don't care anymore. There are many stories that I'm telling my students on the seminars and saying, well, use them. I'm not going to use them. They are good stories, but they're not for me. And that's very interesting, because it becomes like a chain, or like a card play. I tell my story, and I ask other people, my students very often, tell me your story. They will see that that's associated with something. And then it is kind of an avalanche, one story after another. It's a very exciting process, storytelling. We're not traveling that much anymore in trains. Train is a good place where you see the train compartment and you start telling stories. I often tell my future project as something I've heard about recently, and look how people react to it. Do they listen to me or not? And when I don't feel comfortable telling this story, it means it's not a good story.
And that brings me to one question.
Yeah.
What is the next story?
Well, I must complete the previous one, and I have 3 stories I'm working on at the moment, and I know which one will find financing. Probably the one which I like less will be the first to be financed. That's always, but they're all, I hope, good enough to attract you. One will be the story about the theater to be demolished, and this is a project which I'm preparing with Ukraine, my neighbor country. They seem to have money for it, and we hope to shoot it in Odessa, marvelous city. And it will be a fictitious story about the project of demolishing Opera House, which is the pride of Odessa, but in a fictitious story we may say there is a decision of developers to demolish it and build something modern instead. And there will be some protest movement and the film around this story. It's not the one I want to make most, but I think I see the financing. It seems to be ready. If not, I have another story which is linked to Israel, and so I have some help from Israel, but I need some more help, probably from Russia, to make it. And you know, my pocket is full of other stories. If you want to listen to them. Professor?
Well, I'm now tempted to change my question and ask you to please say more about this project, Polish-Ukrainian project. Are you going to have any Ukrainian talent in the film?
Oh yes, of course. I think I will shoot it in Ukraine with many Ukrainian actors. And of course with some Ukrainian capital, I made already one film with Ukraine, but it's not easy, and I'm probably kind of some sort of harbinger of our cooperation, because there is no good law of cinema in Ukraine, so it's very difficult to cooperate. But Ukraine seems to be approaching Europe, so I would like to embrace it. Yes?
Last question.
Oh.
Go ahead, last one.
In the 4 clips you showed us, they were all either shot in multiple languages or in foreign languages, or you talked about place. So I was wondering what role Poland plays in your creative consciousness.
Oh, well, there's definitely my mother country, and Polish is my mother tongue. In all other languages I'm very limited, and I have lots of problems checking words and checking what did they say really what I wanted. Usually in foreign language you say what you can say, not what you want to say. There's a big limitation. And telling jokes in foreign language is the worst, most painful task because nobody laughs. But I think we are becoming, and we're all fascinated now in United Europe by this multiculturalism and multilingualism, that we are open to our neighbors and we see more foreigners than ever in the past. In the past it was only poorest proletarians and upper-class aristocrats. They were cosmopolitan. The rest knew nothing about the neighborhood, knew nothing about the outside world. Now, every day we meet crowds from various countries in every European capital. It is growing very much, and the neighbors may be foreigners, and in your work you will find people of other nationality. That's a new reality, and I'm fascinated with it. I like this fact. I'm very happy that this happens. So I try to reflect it in my films, and that's why the characters are often international.
Well, Mr. Zanussi, thank you so much for spending your really, you have more energy than most teenagers that I know. So I know we're going to have many more films. So I hope you come back and show us a full film next time.
I will.
Great.
Sure.
So a bit of propaganda from Cross. There's good propaganda and bad propaganda. This is good propaganda.